Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving into the absolutely incredible transformation of Kuwait. We're going to be tracing this wild journey from a really harsh desert outpost all the way to one of the wealthiest modern states on Earth. We'll explore exactly how geography, sudden immense wealth, existential crises, and cutting-edge innovation all collided to forge modern Kuwait.
Okay, let's just get right into it. How exactly does a tiny, resource-scarce desert state survive and ultimately thrive when it's surrounded by massive empires? I mean, think about it. At one point in history, the coast of Kuwait was practically a pirate haven. It was this spot of parched sand known mainly to the sailors navigating the really rutted trade routes of the Arabian Gulf. It had no fresh water, literally no timber, and yet, today, it's an absolute global powerhouse.
To really wrap our heads around Kuwait, you've got to grasp this stark contrast. On one side, you have these incredibly humble beginnings, an inhospitable land defined by prostrate shacks and brackish water. But then, on the other side, you have this globalized financial hub boasting some of the highest monetary reserves in the entire world. And the craziest part, this leap from extreme scarcity to becoming a financial titan didn't take millennia. It happened in less than a century. It is quite literally a masterclass in human adaptability.
So here is our roadmap for today's explainer. First up, sand, sea, and trade. Second, the black gold boom. Third, independence and statehood. Fourth, the Gulf War crucible. And finally, modern complexities in society. Let's jump in. Part 1. Sand, sea, and trade. The baseline of adversity.
Human presence here is actually ancient. Archaeologists have unearthed these Halaf culture burial mounds at Al-Qurayn that date back over 7,000 years. But skipping ahead of it, the foundational character of modern Kuwait really took shape in the 18th century. When you're surrounded by unforgiving desert, what do? Well, you turn to the sea. The people here became master boat builders, crafting these impressive dhows for a super lucrative pearl diving industry, which in turn built a really savvy, cosmopolitan merchant class. And that diplomatic savvy proved absolutely crucial by 1899 when Sheikh Mubarak al-Sabah negotiated a treaty placing Kuwait within the British sphere of influence. They managed to secure maritime protection while keeping their essential local autonomy. Pretty brilliant move.
All right, moving on to Part 2. The black gold boom, a massive catalyst.
So, 1949. That is the defining year. The discovery of oil in the Bergen field triggered this almost overnight transformation. Pre-1949, this was a quiet agricultural and coastal town, relying on that traditional pearl diving and battling serious resource scarcity. But post-1949, boom, an explosion of wealth fueled the rise of a sprawling cosmopolitan city. Kuwait very quickly became a pivotal member of OPEC in 1960. The government started sending students abroad, and this very clear national mandate took hold. Kuwait must catch up with the West, and they needed to do it fast.
Which brings us to Part 3, independence and statehood, building a modern nation.
Right, so on June 19, 1961, that old British treaty was officially abrogated. And following full independence, they didn't just slowly evolve. They built the machinery of a modern state at lightning speed. We're talking a brand new constitution, entirely new state ministries like commerce and education, the creation of the National Petroleum Company to manage their biggest asset, and the construction of a towering new international airport. This was a nation aggressively engineering its own modernization, totally supercharged by those soaring oil revenues.
But as you might guess, it wasn't all smooth sailing. Part 4, the Gulf War crucible, an existential test. 100,000. Just let that number sink in for a second. During the Iraqi retreat in 1991, a scorched earth policy resulted in 100,000 barrels of crude oil spewing into the Persian Gulf every single day. The environmental and economic devastation was just almost incomprehensible. It was a true existential crisis for the nation. The skies literally turned black with smoke, and the very core of its economy was ablaze. And the financial devastation was equally staggering. $10 billion. And keep in mind, that was just the initial repair bill for a country that had to be liberated by a massive 34-nation military coalition. The entire infrastructure, from the high-tech oil facilities all the way down to the urban centers, had just been completely shattered.
But here is where that famous Kuwaiti resilience really shines through. They immediately launched a decade of massive post-war reconstruction, heavily borrowing from neighbors and international markets to rebuild their shattered political and economic capital. The primary goal was to secure the rapid return of the population and just re-establish some sense of normalcy. And despite a subsequent stock market crash in 1997, driven by feverish speculation, the physical and institutional rebuilding of Kuwait proved their sheer, unyielding determination to survive.
And that brings us to today, Part 5, Modern Complexities and Society, the Modern Synthesis.
Okay, so modern Kuwait faces a really fascinating workforce paradox. While youth labor participation is actually generally high, over 70% are eager to work, get this, 60% of the unemployed youth are actually highly educated and skilled. Many of them hold tertiary degrees. It's a massive bottleneck. The public sector is heavily government-dominated, and the labor market is simply struggling to absorb this large influx of overeducated talent.
But beyond just the economics, there's a deep, psychological layer at play here. Post-liberation, and right in the middle of incredibly rapid globalization, a deep existential question haunts intellectuals and citizens alike. Do Kuwaiti identity and social structure have the needed capacities to mitigate the repercussions of these changes? Basically, when you're bombarded by global media, heavily reliant on a massive foreign workforce, and dealing with shifting geopolitical sands, how do you adapt to the 21st century without losing who you are?
Now, this identity debate deeply affects social movements, particularly when we look at women's rights. After some really strong early progress from the 1920s to the 1950s with the Al-Nada reawakening movement, which was driven by educated women entering the workforce, recent years have actually seen some pushback. In 2011, and notably during a 2013 parliamentary session, conservative coalitions successfully challenged equal title laws. We're just looking impartially at the historical record here, but it perfectly highlights the ongoing, intense tug-of-war between traditionalism and modernization.
Meanwhile, Kuwait isn't sitting still. They are actively diversifying their future. It's not just about extracting oil from the ground anymore. Kuwaiti inventors and institutions are developing some seriously cutting-edge technologies. We're talking 3D tracking systems for pipelines, self-swinging smart glass for urban architecture, highly specialized medical tear measurement tools, and advanced computerized vehicle inspection systems. The state is investing heavily in patents and technical education to try and build a true, robust knowledge-based economy.
Which leaves us with a really provocative final thought to chew on. Can Kuwait successfully balance its deep, traditional heritage with its high-tech, globalized vision for the future? I mean, they survived the harsh desert, they navigated massive empires, harnessed unbelievable wealth, and literally rebuilt themselves from the ashes of war. Writing this next chapter? Well, that might just be their greatest challenge yet. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and I'll see you next time.